This podcast is part of the Hungry Brothers Broadcasting Network.
Visit hungrybrotherspodcast.podbean.com to hear more of our content every week.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Hungry Brothers, the podcast where we bring you the latest and greatest in entertainment news, but sometimes it is not the latest, and sometimes it is the worst. Of course, I am your host, Greg, also known as Pork Chop.
And I am concept producer, Mac and Cheesy.
My co-host for the day. The BIRDMAN is not here, so instead, what we're doing is we're doing things a little differently today, and this is the first Hungry Brothers double entree. Yeah, and so what I mean by that is we're talking about two movies today. The first movie we're going to talk about is a 2014 feature by the name of BIRDMAN, and we're going to start with non-spoilers and then move into spoilers, the way we do things around here. And then the second film, concept producer Mac and Cheesy is going to say toodle-doo for now. What is it, TTFN? Ta-ta for now?
Yes.
She's going to TTFN up out of here. And then I will be talking about the 2019 feature, Joker. Which, again, same thing. There's going to be a non-spoiler section and a spoiler section of that. So stay tuned to the end if you'd like to hear my less than worthy opinions about Joker. So yeah. We're talking BIRDMAN today, but before we get into BIRDMAN, we're talking Media Munchie.
This week's Media Munchie is from the classic 1977 film, Winnie the Pooh. There's a subtitle.
The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh.
And we are going to have our Media Munchie be the honey that Pooh eats.
Hunny.
Because nothing looks better than Pooh's honey.
Honestly.
Yeah.
Do you like honey normally?
Oh, I love honey.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
What's your favorite thing to have honey with?
I like it in my teas. I also like to put it in cottage cheese.
Cottage cheese? Interesting.
Yeah.
I don't like cottage cheese.
Yeah, I prefer cottage cheese over Greek yogurt. So
weird.
I know.
I have a dairy allergy.
I know.
Which is my excuse for not eating cottage cheese, but I eat every other dairy product, so
Yes.
It don't matter much.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, there's your Media Munchie. It is Honey from Pooh Bear. Today, we are talking about 2014's BIRDMAN, or The Unexpected Virtue of Ignorance. So I've seen the movie before, but you had not.
No, I had not.
So what is your, without spoilers, what is your unfiltered opinion on the whole film?
I thought it was a good reflection on society, really. Most particularly the celebrity scene and how that impacts people. Blockbusters affecting actors for the rest of their lives.
Yeah. It definitely is a sort of, it's a very biting satire as to the way the superhero genre, the comic book genre, has changed entertainment. And what's insane to me is seeing some of the critiques that it makes in the film, and then seeing how even some of that scope has changed and evolved further in the last 5 years since the movie came out. You know, this movie came out before the second Avengers movie. It came out the same year as the second Captain America movie. This was the same year as Guardians of the Galaxy. Marvel didn't go full Marvel yet. We still had Civil War to look at. We still had all of the sequels, right? Mm-hmm. The only sequels that had come at this point were Thor 2 and Iron Man 2 and 3. Everything else was a first, right? Mm-hmm. Captain America 2 was that year. They hadn't Civil War'd yet. They hadn't Spider-Man yet. They hadn't made a deal with Sony yet before we even thought that was possible. They hadn't Infinity War'd yet, and good lord, they had not Endgamed yet. Mm-mm. The only thing that had Endgamed really was Star Wars, because we had 2 trilogies of that, right? Force Awakens wasn't even out yet.
That's crazy.
Which is insane to think about. It was the year before that. Do you think that this movie was a little harsh on what it is to be an actor that plays a superhero?
Yeah, I mean, I believe that just because you are a superhero actor and you quote unquote sell out to become a superhero, doesn't mean you can't act. There's been proven time and time again that most, if not all of these actors playing superheroes are amazing actors when they're in actual dramas, when they're in non-blockbuster movies.
Yeah, I
For the
agree.
most part, I can't think of any that aren't
Yeah, people
really.
who have jumped over from the genre and proved like, oh, they can't do it. I don't think anyone.
No.
Yeah, and that's even what we've talked about one of the actors specifically in sort of a different lens. Is this is a star-studded cast, right? But one of the standout actors is Zach Galifianakis. And I said while we were watching, I said Zach Galifianakis is an underrated actor because he's been reduced to a comedian because of the Hangover series. But he is emotional and he's charming and he's genuine and believable as this character.
Yeah, and I think maybe a lot of actors in this are feeling the same way. Michael Keaton with Batman, Zach Galifianakis with the Hangover series, Emma Stone with Easy A.
Right.
All of these actors, even the actress's name, the one who plays Holly in The Office.
Oh yeah, I don't know her name.
All of them have very type characters that people look at them like, oh, you're blank. When they have so much more depth to them and they actually are phenomenal actors, they just have this. Everyone sees them as one thing when that's not fair to them because they are, multifaceted actors.
Here's another fun thing about Emma Stone is that this movie that she won Best Actress for, she won an Oscar. This movie came out the same year that she co-starred in the worst Spider-Man film, Amazing Spider-Man 2. So if that doesn't talk range, but yeah, I agree with you on the Easy A comment. She is constantly cast as the sarcastic, funny, smart, cutesy, right? We even saw a lot of that in The Help, which is considered one of her more serious roles. She's still very much typecast in that, but she comes into Birdman and she plays a very broken down character, and obviously she killed it. She won an Oscar.
She was phenomenal. Yeah.
It's hard for me to justify this, but I still do kind of think Michael Keaton was robbed from the Oscar. Eddie Redmayne wins for The Theory of Everything,
Which is another phenomenal
which is
movie.
another phenomenal performance. That was had to have been a tough choice for the Academy, because Michael Keaton reminded everyone he's not just a movie star; he is an actor.
Yeah, and I think it was a really emotional scene. This is semi-spoilery, so I don't know.
Are you talking about the ending?
No, I'm talking about when he's in the bar with the critic.
Ah, yeah. Let's talk more about that one later too. So
To be continued on my
to be
comment.
continued on that comment. Would you say there's any weak performances in this movie?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, even some of these smaller characters, I think Naomi Watts is incredible. Not that she's a small role. No, there really isn't a small role other than the aforementioned critic. But even then, she kills it. She's kind of terrifying.
Well, and she's a cornerstone in this movie.
Right. She's central to the plot, as small of a role as she plays. Okay, great. Let's move into spoiler territory and let's sort of break down the plot. So, I'm gonna let you do it, and I'll clarify, being that I've seen this movie several times. So what was the plot? What happened in this movie?
Well, this plot was following what was his name?
Riggin Thompson,
Riggin Thompson, and he,
played by Michael Keaton.
which I feel was Michael Keaton rewritten, like the actor. I mean, he was Birdman in the 90s, in the early 90s, which is very homage to Batman.
Right.
And he's now trying to make it again. He's going broke. He doesn't have any money. He can't land any other roles. And he's like, I'm going to try Broadway. And I want to kill it. And so it's his inner fight and inner struggle between him proving himself to himself. It's about him.
And also having to prove himself to Birdman.
Yeah. Prove himself to Birdman, prove himself to others, prove himself. And I think Birdman is himself. It is a big part of him. And since he was Birdman for so many years and that's how people view him, it's hard for him to even separate himself from Birdman, which we see throughout the plot. There's scenes where he's using his powers as Birdman, but it's really him destructing things or moving things when in his mind it's him using his Birdman powers. He can't it's hard for him to differentiate himself from Birdman. And yeah, it's just about his downward spiral of how he can't leave Birdman.
Right. And this is actually, it's kind of a cool thread that the director, Inarritu is his last name, Inarritu, that he sort of took threads from Batman comics, which I thought was interesting because part of being Bruce Wayne is he isn't at a actually, well, let me phrase it the opposite way. Part of being Batman is he has a constant inner struggle with Bruce Wayne. So there's a really cool moment from one of the animated movies where Wonder Woman, Superman, and Batman all grab onto Wonder Woman's lasso of truth, and they're going to reveal their identities to each other. And so Diana, Wonder Woman, touches it. She goes, "I'm Diana, princess of Themyscira, daughter of Zeus." And Superman's like, "I'm Clark Kent. I work at the Daily Planet." And then Batman grabs it. He just says, "I'm Batman," because he's not Bruce Wayne. Batman is who he is. And that's sort of this cool thread of Riggin trying to be Riggin, but somewhere deep down, he's Birdman. And we see a lot of the times in comics, like Dark Knight Returns, we even see this in the animated film that you and I watched, that Bruce Wayne is trying to be Bruce Wayne, but Batman calls out to him. He says, no, you're weak. You need me. Let me back out. And we see these same kinds of conversations where Birdman tells Riggin, you're weak, you're a phony. So that's kind of a cool little comic thread that got carried over into this, not a ripoff, because it's a totally different kind of superhero, but what's definitely, yeah, like you don't cast Michael Keaton in this role as a coincidence. It's meant to be Batman.
Yeah, and going back to the scene I was talking about earlier, there's a scene where he's in a bar next to his theater, and he was going there after one of their previews, and he talked to a critic, and this critic makes or breaks Broadway productions. And she can put things out of production if she gives a bad review. And there's a scene where he goes up to her. I think he's trying to maybe buy her a drink, talk to her, get to know her a little bit to soften the blow because he knows she doesn't like him because he's a celebrity. And he says, I'm an actor. She's like, you're not an actor. You're a celebrity. There's a big difference. And then he goes on this huge rant about how just because he's a celebrity, the very paraphrasing, just because he's a celebrity doesn't mean he's not an actor. And he was basically saying, you're just a crude woman who hates her life and writes crude and labeling comments about others to make yourself feel better.
Which I think is brilliant.
Yeah. And it was a really powerful moment, and I really felt like I almost was like crying with him, because he was like tearing up during this thing. And I think it's because he can actually feel that, I would say a lot of serious actors in Hollywood right now were the kids who were drama kids. They were drama kids. They were kids who struggled with bullying, with trying to make it for so long that, yeah, they did have a big break. That doesn't mean that they don't have that acting background. They don't have that struggle background of trying to make it. And just because they chose Hollywood over Broadway doesn't mean they're any less of an actor.
Right.
Anyways, that's...
Right. So as the plot forwards, we begin to see an inner struggle between Riggin and Birdman. And there's these key moments all throughout the film scattered where we wonder, is Riggin actually Birdman? Does he possess these powers? So one of these first instances is a lighting fixture falls on one of the actors during a rehearsal, right at the moment that Riggin is ready for this guy to shut the hell up, essentially. And it's not until later in the film when we see other instances of Riggin, air quoting here, using his powers, that we see, did he do that? Did he make that light fall? I don't know if you ever had that thought during the process. It didn't even
click with me until now that he probably made that. He probably hit him with the light.
Exactly. Um, so, which is why, you know, it was clearly what we were meant to see was clearly an accident. But then Zach Galifianakis' character is like, dude, he's gonna sue us. So
And honestly, throughout the movie, I'm like, why would he sue him? It was an accident. Like, it didn't mean for the
yeah,
And
was
I
it an
just
accident?
clicked
Yeah.
that it probably wasn't. Yeah.
So this movie's a thinker for sure. So as you continue on, you see these power struggles, really key moments. The new actor that gets hired on, his name is Mike Shiner, played by Edward Norton, and he's kind of a pretentious douchebag.
Yeah. Well, yeah, for most of it.
Yeah, we do see something of a softer side in him,
Yeah.
and that's going to concern another performance that it goes hand in hand with, really. But he shows up, and he basically is trying to make the play better. But Riggins not having it because he really thinks his material is good. He adapted it from a book, so he's like, no, we're not going to change it. It's fine. Continuing on. Riggins' assistant, let's talk about that now, actually. Let's just go through his character arc. Riggins' assistant is played by Emma Stone, and it is Riggins' daughter. Her name is Sam. And we see a lot of interaction between Ed Norton's character and Emma Stone's character. And this is where we're revealed the softer side of Mike Shiner.
Yeah. They play on the rooftop of the theater Truth or Dare, and at first he's like, what are we, kids? Like, we can't play this. And you know, he always picks truth in Truth or Dare, and so she asks him really hard-hitting questions. And he opens up to her, and I think because he knows that she's broken too, and that he's kind of confiding in her. So it's just a really interesting plot line. It's when you see that, oh, it kind of makes sense that he's kind of an a-hole, you know?
Yeah, and you wonder, we're never really told, but you wonder, what happened to this guy? Why is he like this?
Yeah, there's a line or like a little moment where he says, she asked, it's meant to be in a sexual way, but she says, if you weren't scared, which too long to explain, watch the movie. But she says, what would you do to me if you weren't scared? And he said, I would take your eyeballs out. And then she went, oh, or I forgot what she said, but then he's like, and I would put them in me so I could see the streets of New York like you do. Or like I did when I was your age. And so obviously a lot of hurt there. Something happened.
Right.
So.
And it almost seems like he can't have his own emotional experiences anymore. So what happens is Riggin and Mike go to a bar, and they're hanging out there, and Riggin really kind of opens up to him and says, this is why I became an actor. This is why I'm adapting the material I'm adapting. And then he turns around in an interview, Mike does. He turns around, and in an interview, he uses Riggin's exact story, passing it off as his own.
When he was making fun of it the night before.
Right, he was making fun of it the night before. This guy only complimented you because he was drunk. He gave you his autograph on a cocktail napkin. And then he turns around and uses the exact story as his sob story. Oh, my dad was a drunk. Ray Carver is why I want to be an actor. And Riggin snaps a little bit when he finds out about this. Punches him in the face. Makes him believe that he's a little bit of a psychopath. Which, as it continues on, he might be.
I wouldn't say he was a psychopath, but he definitely has... It looks like a type of schizophrenia. Yeah. I mean, if you were to just take the movie aspect out of it, like, it looks like he has schizophrenia.
Yeah, if you were to look at it from a literalist standpoint, it would be a form of schizophrenia.
Yeah.
Well, thankfully, we have a budding psychological expert as a producer on this podcast, so we get to. Actually, I think I want to do this in the future. Let's. This is the pilot for film psychoanalysis with Dr. Mac and Cheese.
I'm not a doctor yet, but hopefully one day. And I actually have the book that you need to assess and diagnose people. So that would be kind of fun.
We should do this.
That would be fun.
This would be a great idea. Let's talk to the BIRDMAN about it too.
It would take planning, and we wouldn't be able to do it on the fly, but it would be fun.
Right. It would be a very much a planned segment,
a premeditated thing,
for movies that we've seen several times that we can watch several times.
I've actually done this exact thing in one of my courses where I took a movie character and I diagnosed them. So this would be really fun for me.
That's awesome. Yeah. So I would say by the time like 2020 rolls around and we've got the Blu-ray on hand, we will similarly psychoanalyze Arthur Fleck in the 2019 film Joker, and that'd be a lot of fun too. So yeah, so we continue on. Anyways, a little tangent here. We continue on, and let's do a little bit of a rapid fire section here. Riggin finds out that his girlfriend, who's one of the co-stars, is pregnant, but then she's not, and it's okay, because they agree they'd be terrible parents. Sam's mom comes around, and they decide that Riggin should have been a better parent, and that they don't miss each other, but maybe they do. Mike commits sexual assault on stage and then breaks up with his girlfriend over it, who was also the co-star that he sexually assaulted on stage. Mike and Sam start sleeping together. Or, yeah, no, they definitely do.
Yeah, they do.
And they like each other because, I don't know, it's like it's two broken people hanging out together and they enjoy each other's company. Riggin's previews go okay. And then he goes and talks to the critic and basically gives her a big middle finger, which we already talked about. So we'll glide right over it saying, you're a phony. Because she willingly says, I'm going to tear your play apart. I don't care what the outcome is. I don't care if I love it. I got to rip it into shreds. And then this movie, I see it more as a side plot because I tend to not see the relevance in terms of the characters themselves. But this movie also takes a stance of anti-technology. Mm-hmm. Or at least our main character is very anti-technology. Mm-hmm. Like him as a star doesn't even have a Facebook like page. Mm-hmm. Never made a Facebook, doesn't have a Twitter. But he begins to learn over time that it's the way the world works.
And it's powerful now.
Yeah, it's powerful now that the aftermath of Mike's sexual assault on stage as he gets out of the bed and he's wearing underwear and he has an erection and you can see it. And he's proud of the fact, he goes, it got 50,000 views on YouTube overnight. That is stardom. That is how you are a celebrity now.
And they mention it, they use the term power. It gives them power.
Right.
There's a scene where Riggin also, he makes space. Long story how he gets there. He gets locked out of his theater during the play. He's only in his tidy whities. And he has to walk through Times Square in order to get back into the theater to get back to the play. Anyways, there's a viral video that goes, completely viral. I think they said like 1.4 million views overnight. It gets of him walking around in Times Square in his tidy whities. I'm very redundant. I'm sorry. But his daughter, Sam, said, Dad, no, this isn't a bad thing. This gives you power.
Right. And being that, we are at our core as the Hungry Brothers Broadcasting Network, we rely on the idea that technology is power. I can find ways to agree with the two what are meant to be perceived as the younger characters, with including Mike in that, of Mike and Sam saying, yeah, no, technology is power now, and I can find a lot of ways to agree with that. But I think I can also find ways to agree with the other side of the coin, that it's limiting and it is a little bit debilitating.
Well, I think in a lot of ways this movie leaves you thinking. It's not going to give you answers. Mm-hmm. You have to think about it and process it, which is kind of what we're doing right now.
Well, and I think that's what's important about it is the movie doesn't take a stance. The characters take stances, and it's meant to spark up a debate between its viewers, right? So I studied this film in a film class that I took, and man, we had some pretty deep intellectual discussions about it, about some of the repercussions of what society is now with technology, what society was like before, seeing both sides of the coin. And what was cool, because it was a college course, is there were people of all ages, all demographics, all races, and we all had these conversations together. I think films like this are important for that reason and that reason alone, honestly. So let's go ahead and move into the ending, because the ending is what leaves a lot of people guessing.
Yeah.
So Riggin decides, I need to make this authentic. I need to make it real. Mm-hmm. But also I hate myself.
Yeah.
So I'm going to shoot myself on stage. Mm-hmm. And he fails miserably at that. Mm-hmm. Because all he does is shoot off his own nose. But he shoots himself on stage, and because it was a stage shot beforehand, it was using a prop gun and a what are those exploding blood things called? I can't remember the
I
word
don't
for it.
know.
Anyways, with the exploding blood all over the place and actually shooting himself this time, he gets a standing ovation, and I think it's a really powerful shot in the film because everybody stands,
But he's not getting up.
but the critic doesn't stand. She gets up and walks out. They keep clapping. He's not getting up. Then we cut to the hospital.
And at this point, we don't know. He just shoots off his nose.
We think he's dead.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we cut to the hospital, and we meet him again. And there's a good bit of irony here because the facial bandages that he's wearing look exactly like his Birdman costume. So it's like comeuppance, you tried to escape me, but you can't. I'm always going to be here. And we have this moment where after talking with his ex-wife and his daughter, he goes into the bathroom and he sees Birdman one last time. And he tells Birdman, bye-bye, F you, and exits the room via the window. I say exits because there's two ways to interpret everything in this film. Right? You can interpret it as he is Birdman and he has supernatural abilities. Or you can interpret it as he's a human being that has a deep-seated mental illness. Right? So his daughter comes into the room after he exits from the window. And this is where it's left even more up to interpretation. Is she looks out the window, terrified. She looks down, looks around, looks up, smiles. Cut to black, you hear both of them laughing. What happens in the end of this movie? We don't know for sure. We can take our guesses. It's like breaking down Marvel movies again. Oh my god. It could go either way. The two of us personally believe that he's dead. That the superpower moments were fake. Because again, they show it to you both ways. You see Riggin using his telepathic powers to trash his dressing room. But then his best friend, Zach Galifianakis, walks in, and he's simply throwing stuff around. We see a scene of Riggin flying around the city to the theater. But then when he lands, a cab driver's chasing him, say, hey, you didn't pay me, you need to pay me. We see Riggin look at flying birds and then jump out the window. And Birdman flew away, but Riggin fell, or so we think. Maybe
That's our interpretation.
That's our interpretation. Maybe he did have powers. Maybe he didn't. What kind of movie does this want to be? One that leaves you with thoughts. Any parting thoughts on Birdman?
I think it's worth a watch for everyone. But it is kind of dark, so just if you're going through something, maybe I don't know, think twice about it. But
Right.
I think it's a phenomenal film. It's deserving of its Academy Award win.
Yes, it won Best Picture, 2015 Oscars. And on the note of dark themes, if you're watching something or if you're going through something, be wary of this movie. What we're going to talk about next, or what I'm going to talk about next, is Joker. Similar to Birdman in a lot of ways, Joker is nothing more than a portrayal. It's a broken down portrayal of a broken down person. So in Birdman we had Riggin, whose life was torn apart by his past as a celebrity rather than an actor. But in Joker we have Arthur Fleck. Arthur Fleck is a really interesting character because he's not horribly sympathetic. The way they set him up, and I think they did this the perfect way, because I think what a lot of people were nervous about was making a character like the Joker sympathetic. So instead of sympathy, what we feel for the Joker is on edge. So the way I've been describing this is similar to Room, starring Brie Larson. So if you watch Room with Brie Larson, there's a scene where if you're invested in this plot, you start feeling so much anxiety. You start feeling on edge about the entire plot because everything is coming to a head at once here. And as a result of this, you get anxious, your heart starts beating, and I think I was sweating when I watched it. I was sitting in an air conditioned room and I was sweating because I was just nervous for these characters. In Joker, you sort of get this feeling. It's not quite on the same level because instead of a deep and heavy anxiety with your heart pumping and you're shaking, you're just sort of mildly nervous through this whole film. And I'll get more into it later, but it's because of the way Todd Phillips and Joaquin Phoenix sort of set up this Joker. He's very different from any other portrayals that we've seen so far. So I thought that was a cool choice that they made, was to be very different. So the overall review, before we get into spoilers, is good, not great. For me, at least personally. Maybe other people found this great, and more power to them, but I just thought it was good. Some of the things that I liked most were Joaquin Phoenix, just being Joaquin Phoenix. The other things that I liked were the entire supporting cast was excellent. I found it a little bit difficult to believe Robert De Niro's portrayal, and I think that just has a lot to do with it being very different from anything else I've ever seen Robert De Niro do. We knew that Thomas Wayne was going to be in this movie. This portrayal is pretty good. However, this guy reminded me a lot of Alec Baldwin, and it just made me a little sad that they weren't able to finalize Alec Baldwin to play Thomas Wayne. There's some really cool plot threads set up in this, and the movie keeps you guessing. And that's all that I'll say about that. You're never quite sure of anything, and you're definitely not sure of what will happen next. So overall, Joker was good, not great. I'd say I'd land it somewhere between a 6 and a 7 out of 10. Of course, that being on my personal scale, which is probably broken, but that's fine. So Joker, let's say like 7 out of 10. So Joker was a 7 out of 10 for me. I enjoyed it a lot, but I can definitely see some of the flaws behind it, and I can definitely understand why other people wouldn't like it. Okay, so just to continue being a little bit general before I get into spoilers, this movie is very disturbing. It is graphic. It is a warts and all portrayal of a character with severe mental illness, and it pulls all the stops. They definitely don't go light on you, and I think that was the right choice working with a character like the Joker. So with that, we will get into spoilers now. If you haven't seen Joker yet, I'm really going to go deep into the spoiler territory of this movie. So if you haven't seen it, you can feel free to step out of the episode now. Thank you so much for listening. Catch us on our social medias. They are all listed in our descriptions below. Thanks. Okay, so here we go. Spoiler time. This movie leads you to believe that nothing is true at some point. So, Arthur Fleck, Joaquin Phoenix, begins to imagine scenarios. And we see this from the very beginning. He sits down with his mother to watch the television program that Robert De Niro is the host for. It's kind of like a Johnny Carson type of Tonight Show rather than a Jimmy Fallon kind of night show. And he immediately transforms himself, and he imagines himself in the audience of I don't even remember the character's name now, but he imagines himself in the audience of this show, and he stands up, and he's charming, and he's entertaining, and then Robert De Niro's character, the talk show host, invites him on stage and tells him how much he loves him, and I think filling a fatherly void that Arthur Fleck is clearly lacking, which is another plot thread that they set up right then and there. More on that one later as well. So he is seen immediately as imagining scenarios. So we are being told a story from an unreliable narrator. And later we get other things that prove that even more. So Zazie Beetz is in this movie, and she's great as usual, though she's very, very, very underused in this film. She doesn't talk a lot. If I'm not mistaken, she only has a name because she's credited with a name. I don't think anyone ever says her name, which is interesting. But he begins to imagine a friendship and a romantic relationship with her. This occurs after his first breaking point where he kills some people. He imagines himself going to her apartment in the middle of the night and just sort of of engaging physically with her, is what I'll say about that. But later on, after all of this, they establish like a deep relationship. They're hanging out. They like each other. When Arthur's mother gets sick, she's there in the hospital with him, which seems quick for a story that only takes place over a few days, I think. But later on, he finds himself in her apartment after another breakdown of like, I had a bad day, and she looks at him and she says, "You're in the wrong apartment. Your name's Arthur, right? Can you please leave? My daughter's asleep in the other room." Signaling that they've never had any of the experiences that he's been imagining. And then we actually get the flashbacks confirming this, where we see all of the situations that they enacted together, and then she disappears from all of them. She was never there for any of it. So it's another thread that says this is an unreliable narrator. The other big plot thread here arrives at the end, tying all this together. And at the very end, we see him in handcuffs in like a therapy room in the Arkham State Hospital, and he's laughing as he does the whole movie. A therapist asks him what's so funny. He says, "You wouldn't get it." And it seriously just like cuts to this from the final scene, and we're left thinking, did any of this movie happen? Was it all fake? And I think that's interesting to think about, because even if it is all fake, I think it speaks a lot to what the Joker is. And it still allows us to have our anonymity for the Joker. I thought it was a weird choice that they decided to name this version of the Joker. Even versions of the Joker in the comics where we see him before his transformation, such as the Killing Joke, we still never get a name. Which makes me think that if they were to continue on with this story, this Joker may not be the Joker that faces off against a Batman. I've heard some theories about this. I don't know a whole lot what to think about it, and personally, I don't really think this movie's ever going to turn into anything. I think it'll just stay a standalone, and that's fine with me. So the other big plot thread, other than the is this real or not, is paternity. The Joker lacks a father figure. He has a mother, and that's it. Later, we hear a lot about Thomas Wayne in this movie. He's running for mayor. He's a big philanthropist in in 1980s Gotham City, and we get word from Arthur's mother that she's been writing to Thomas Wayne. She used to work for Thomas Wayne, and she's asking Thomas Wayne for help. Arthur decides to read one of these letters, and she writes down in the letter to Thomas Wayne, "You need to help your son," referring to Arthur. So Arthur's very, very, very upset by this. Like, why didn't you tell me he was my father? And then he goes and questions other people, including, we meet a young Bruce Wayne and Alfred Pennyworth in this movie, which I thought was fun. And Alfred Pennyworth tells Arthur, Penny Fleck was crazy. She was insane. She made up this whole story. In fact, you're not even really her son. She adopted you. So he goes to the Arkham State Hospital and he pulls records. He steals records, actually, medical records of Penny Fleck, finding out that what may have happened to Arthur Fleck was she adopted him, and she allowed him to be abused by an abusive boyfriend, which may have caused some major brain damage, being the source of all of his medical conditions and his mental health problems. So, with that, Arthur, in his rage, encounters Thomas Wayne and says, "Aren't you're my father? You have to be. Look at us," which I thought was an interesting choice there. And Arthur gets punched. He's like, "Yeah, no, your mother's crazy, and I'm not your father. She made the whole thing up. You're adopted. Get with the program." So in his anger, Arthur actually kills his mother through his anger, and she dies. So he has nobody at this point. He's completely alone, which is going to trigger a full transformation into Joker. So those two primary plot threads in the movie semi-converge of what was real and what wasn't, because if both of these characters, Arthur and Penny Fleck, have their mental health issues, is really one of them adopted? Is it because of the abuse, or are they really blood related? Is Thomas Wayne, the billionaire philanthropist, is he has he just produced a massive cover-up story so that no one would know he had an illegitimate son with one of his workers? Are Bruce Wayne and the Joker brothers? Stuff like this has been alluded to in the comics before. I'm not a big fan of this one. When they brought up the idea of Thomas Wayne maybe being Arthur Fleck's dad, sort of rolled my eyes. And I think a lot of that has to do with I really like the story where the potential of Bruce Wayne's brother being one of the Talons from the Court of Owls. I think that's way more interesting. But I think this has potential to be an ongoing story, but I totally understand Todd Phillips' viewpoint that he just wants this to be a one film. So, yeah. Most of the criticisms I've seen about this movie have a lot to do with glorifying violence. And what I have to say to that is this just is the Joker. This is what the Joker has been since his transformation in the 80s. He's been a gruesome character. The things that Joker does in this movie are nothing compared to what we've seen Joker do in the books over the last 10 years. This is the Joker that cut off his own face. This is the Joker that mentally tortured the Bat family into believing he cut off their faces too. This is a Joker that constantly and consistently brings Batman to the brink of killing Joker, playing mind games, playing physical games, killing whoever it is he needs to kill. Joker's body count in this movie is shockingly low. If we want to see a Joker body count, let's look at The Dark Knight Returns. Joker does much worse things in this. Look at The Killing Joke. Joker commits sexual assault on someone. So I think the violence in this movie is honestly pretty undertoned in terms of what the Joker is and what the Joker does. So I think that's an invalid complaint. The other big complaint that I see is a continued comparison with Joker's past. And I think it's super important to keep this version of the Joker separated from anything else we've ever seen. The two big contenders that I think of here are Joaquin Phoenix and Heath Ledger. And the question is constantly arising, well, which one is better? And I don't think that's a question that we need to ask. Because it's not about which Joker is better, but what it's really about is what do we like about these Jokers? Because they are both excellent. Joaquin Phoenix has given one of the best performances of his career, I think. And with that, we can then do some comparisons with Heath Ledger. What did they do differently? Well, I think their biggest strength, and it's actually a similarity between them, is they both have the demeanor of a cool and calculated Joker. Yeah, the laughing is unsettling, and yeah, he's clearly crazy, but he's not like Mark Hamill's portrayal where it's a complete unhinged, giddy psychopath the whole time. Instead, we have a cool and calculated, mostly level-headed Joker that stands there and you can't really read his emotions other than the smile he makes. And you can't help but wonder, what is he going to do next? You're constantly on the edge of your seat in this way. This is that like mild anxiety I was talking about the whole time. You're on the edge of your seat. You're like, what is he going to do next? What is he going to do? And he pretty consistently surprises you in this movie. So, yeah, I'd say that's a pretty solid spiel on the Joker. I won't go too much more into it. When we finally get the BIRDMAN to see it, we'll definitely have more of a discussion on the film. Thank you for joining this weird episode of Hungry Brothers Nerd News. I know it's an atypical one, but Noe and I had a hard time scheduling these past couple of weeks. My classes all just started right now, and then we're all busy with work. So big thanks to concept producer Mac and Cheesy for joining me for the first half of this episode talking about Birdman. And again, if you haven't seen Birdman, I know we spoiled quite a bit of it, but we also glossed over quite a bit of it. So I think it would be a great idea for you guys to go back and watch that movie as well. If you liked this format, let us know. We can do more reviews elsewhere. I would like to bring something like this over to YouTube. So if you guys would be interested in that, please let me know on Twitter. You can follow us at Hungry Bros Pod. You can let us know on Facebook. That's facebook.com/Hungry Bros Pod, or you can search at Hungry Bros Pod, I think. You can follow me on Instagram at grandiloquent_mediocrity, and you can follow me on Twitter at Fancy Shirt Post. So let me know if the movie reviews is something that you like, something you want more of, and if you guys like them, if you guys would be interested in more, we can definitely do more of this, and we can play around with the format a little bit. We can play around a lot more with the organizational aspects of it all. So let us know what you think. Of course, this episode is going up late, and I apologize for that. So be sure to tune in tomorrow for the next episode of Hungry Dungeon. We finally have a campaign update that we're really, really excited to bring you guys. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you on Thursday.